First tonight, the Abbott government's hoping for bouquets, not brickbats, over what seems to be another major backflip on core coalition policy. After repeated warnings that the days of corporate welfare were over, the government has reversed a decision to dump assistance to the car industry. Free marketers are scratching their heads and some in the Liberal Party are grumbling about a lack of consultation. Here's political correspondent Sabra Lane.
It is a defining point in terms of where we go with industry policy in Australia now.
I say to you emphatically, everyone in Australia must do the heavy lifting now. The age of entitlement is over. The age of personal responsibility has begun.
There's not going to be any extra money over and above the generous support that taxpayers have been giving the motor industry for a long time.
Ending industry assistance to the car sector, Qantas and SPC, has been a defining core principle of the Abbott government.
Too many taxpayers' dollars have been spent on corporate welfare.
The government announced last May it would cut taxpayer support to the car industry by $900 million. It argued with Holden, Ford and Toyota exiting local production, the money was no longer required. And it stuck by the decision despite a chorus of complaints from unions, businesses and car companies. Imagine then the surprise at this morning's Adelaide Advertiser front page, reporting an apparent major policy U-turn with the reinstatement of the $900 million to the Automotive Transformation Scheme.
That's a pistol rod? Yep.
By the time the Industry Minister Ian Macfarlane confirmed a policy change, the amount of the reinstatement had been drastically whittled down.
I'm also announcing that the government will withdraw legislation that was to take $500 million out of the ATS between now and 2017.
The Minister made the announcement while visiting a car components manufacturer in Adelaide.
We've done that because in discussions that I was having, particularly here in Adelaide last year as early as August, there was a level of uncertainty in the automotive industry and particularly the component industry that was concerning the government, in that we need the component industry to be there the very last day that Holden and Toyota roll cars off the assembly line at the end of 2017.
The opposition argues the government's acted to save its own skin.
This is a government that now is moving because of political expedience, not because they're actually concerned about the future of this industry.
The idea that the government, a Liberal government, is reversing that decision to remove corporate welfare, I think is quite important, and it may have political consequences as well.
Chris Berg from the Institute of Public Affairs says the government's announcement sends a terrible message.
I think this suggests to the electorate that the government doesn't know what it wants out of its political economy, but it also sends a message to rent seekers across the country that even if the government says that they're shutting the door to your claims on taxpayer money, you can still barge your way in.
South Australian independent Nick Xenophon says the announcement's a lemon. He says the government's trying to win political brownie points for a policy that won't save any jobs. One union agrees.
For them, it doesn't change anything. For them, if they're at Ford in 2016, their jobs are gone. If they're at Holden and Toyota in 2017, their jobs are gone.
The ABC's been told the government expects to spend no more than $100 million during the next 3 years on the Automotive Transformation Scheme. The rest, $800 million, it expects to save. Minister Macfarlane's own press release acknowledges that. Buried near the bottom of the detail, it says most of the savings from the program will be realised.
What that final number is, I'll tell you at the end of 2017.
The government has finally twigged that because the big three car makers are leaving in a couple of years' time, car parts and components makers just aren't putting in the research now to draw down on the industry support scheme. The government has finally twigged that because the big three car makers are leaving soon, there is more money available in the scheme than was originally thought.
Minister Macfarlane says the decision was taken about 3.5 weeks ago. Cabinet wasn't consulted, it was made by the Expenditure Review Committee, the government's razor gang. It wasn't discussed in the Coalition Party room either, as the Minister says there was a danger the announcement would leak, which means he doesn't trust his colleagues. South Australian Coalition MPs are delighted with the decision. Others are annoyed at the way the policy announcement was made. The IPA's Chris Berg wonders what the government stands for, given it's reversed major policy decisions on the car fund, defence pay and the Medicare co-payment.
The government's walking itself into a real trap here. It's spelt out the case for reform, for economic reform in the intergenerational report, but everything else it's doing suggests it's completely gun-shy, it's going to shirk the hard decisions, and the 2015 budget looks like it's going to be an absolute wash. It's just going to set the economic problem far into the future.
Sabra Lane reporting.